We are pleased to present this program today featuring the United States Senator Barbara Boxer. This event is part of PPIC's speaker series on California's future, and I'd like to thank all the sponsors, some who are in this room, for this series and underwriting this effort. These organizations are listed on the screen and also on the back of your program. This series is also funded by PPIC's Donor Circle, a group of very bright individuals and organizations that provide generous support to PPIC. The funding from these sponsors and donors makes these programs possible and ensures that they are free and open to the public. Their support also ensures that we could broadcast these events to a wider audience so others can participate. I encourage you to learn more about how you can support PPIC as a donor or sponsor by checking our website or talking to any of the PPIC staff today. And so can you also please check your cell phones to make sure they're on silence too. It's my honor and pleasure to introduce Senator Barbara Boxer. She is serving her fourth term as a junior senator from California after having served 10 years in the House of Representatives, and you can see the program for more details about her work. Prior to her public service, she was born in Brooklyn, New York, studied economics, worked as a stockbroker, moved to California, and was a journalist before entering politics. And since I'm doing this introduction, I like to highlight some of the accomplishments I like that she has done. Certainly her work with the, as a ranking member of the Environmental and Public Works Committee, where she tackled issues of global warming and protection of the environment.
Thank you.
She has been a relentless supporter and an advocate for the powerless and those that are often invisible in our world and state. My image of Senator Boxer is feisty. She gets things done, and she never backs down from a confrontation. That's how I want my elected officials to work. I first met Senator Boxer in the summer of 1993 when she had just been elected to the Senate. She was visiting the San Joaquin Valley, specifically Fresno, and our farm. So I remember asking, how can I make an impression on this newly elected senator? Well, of course, I thought one of the best ways would be to give her a box of our best peaches from our family farm, and she seemed to enjoy the gift. Only later, though, when I received the follow-up letter, that I realized I had succeeded. And Senator, I happen to have that letter. It's dated July 22nd, 1993.
A historic document.
It says, "Dear Moss, I've received a number of kind gifts in my travels throughout the state, but none tasted better than your Suncrest peaches. You were great. You must be very proud to have produced such a wonderful product. Thank you for your kindness and generosity." So that marked the beginning of a wonderful relationship. It was the start of her Senate career. And here today, in her final years in the Senate, we can engage in a conversation. But I did have one question. After she received my gift of peaches, when she filled out the financial disclosure form, I wonder what value she placed on those peaches.
Oh boy, I'm in trouble.
The fact that I saved the letter 22 years later, I think they were priceless. So it's my honor to introduce Senator Boxer, and now I hand this over to PPIC President Mark Baldassare, and we look forward to an engaging conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark.
Mas, it's wonderful to have an author and a farmer on our board. And when our staff noticed that you were in the building today, I'm sure they were wondering where are the peaches, you know. So not everybody understands the whole schedule of it, and it's raisin time now and so forth. But thank you so much and Marcy for coming. And Senator Boxer, what a privilege to have you at PPIC today. And we really valued your leadership so much. You've been representing California and Washington for 32 years, combined House and Senate. And there are very few people that have the perspective that you have serving that length of time in Washington. And I know that, that many of us who watch Washington from afar would value just understanding how things have changed and what it's like working there this year for you.
Oh, boy. Well, I want to start with something easier. Thank you, Mas.
Okay.
We may have to burn that letter because I don't think I declared that they were worth. It had to be worth less than $29. So hopefully, I made it. But anyway, seriously, the fact that you saved that is so sweet and kind and makes me happy. Thank you. Well, I just want to say thank you, Mark, for this invitation and all of you for coming. Because if you weren't here, it would be sad for me. So I'm really glad you are here. You know, your question is, what has it been like to be in a place and how has it changed? I think we could all answer that in our world, whether it's about our community, it's about our friendships, it's about our work environment. And so change is important, and a lot of change is good and a lot of change is not good. And I would say one of the good things, to start with something good, is we've seen a lot more women get elected to the Congress. Now, you remember that in 1992 when Diane and I ran, we had 2 women in the United States Senate, Nancy Kassenbaum and Barbara Mikulski. And, you know, you really can't have a representative government that is so skewed in the other direction. It would be the same way if it were reversed. I wouldn't be for it either. So the bottom line is we've seen that change, and we are up to 20 women in the United States Senate. And I just, yeah, it's good. So how has it changed for me? We've gone from 2% to 20%. And I think this election cycle, we have a chance to pick up some more seats, even though 2 of us are, we're not retiring, we're not running again. I intend to continue my work, I'll tell you that, but won't be running again. So we lose 2, we got to pick up 2 just to stay whole. I think we'll do that and hopefully pick up some steam. We need a little bit more diversity in the United States Senate, not enough diversity. So that to me is very important as we move forward, and there's no doubt it's going to happen. Is it no doubt it's going to happen? We have African Americans running for the United States Senate. We have Hispanics running for the United States Senate. We have Asian Americans running this cycle. I would add all in the Democratic Party because that's who we are, and I'm proud of that. So that's happening. On the bad side, the parties have moved so far apart that there's a chasm between us. And it's awful. It's just awful. And I want to just say, because I'm straight from the heart with you, I don't think it's the Democrats moving left. We have become more environmental, but that's not left or right. That's just smart because it's science. And so I think we're there. And, you know, on women's rights, we're just continuing the progress that's been made, nothing outlandish. We still support the ERA. That's a good thing. So I don't see that, you know, on a woman's right to choose, we're still there. And again, I thought that was settled with Roe v. Wade in '73. But if you look at my colleagues on the other side, and I'll close with this, the big thing, and I know we're going to talk about this, the Iran deal, which we'll explore. The big story isn't watching for who on the Democratic side, it shouldn't be, who on the Democratic side is announcing with bated breath. It's the fact that we don't have one Republican announcing for this deal. What is that about? When I started, you know, foreign policy, it was bipartisan. So that's just an example. A woman's right to choose was bipartisan. The environment was bipartisan. Planned Parenthood was founded by Republicans, more Republicans than Democrats. So that is a sadness I carry in my heart. And the implications of that, you know, are gridlock. There are these, you know, hurling insults across the aisle, and that's the bad part. I've managed to weave my way through it on certain things, which is hard to do, but I've done it on a few things. I'm sure we'll talk about that. But that's what I would say. You know, the good news, more women, we're going to have more diversity. The bad news is parties have grown so far apart. It's a problem.
Thank you. That's an important perspective to have. I think you mentioned the fact that there are some examples, and I noticed one this year that I wanted you to talk about, which was that you and Mitch McConnell together proposed the highway bill, which when I heard that news, I thought, wow, you know. And I wonder if funding for transportation, hugely important in California, and an issue which the legislature is now struggling with. And I'm not sure whether we'll get bipartisan resolution on that. So can you tell me about that process and how it worked with Senator McConnell, your Republican colleague? And can we expect that there will be a highway bill? And what will it mean for California?
Okay. Working with Mitch McConnell was unexpected. Very unexpected. And we actually hadn't talked too much in 20 years. So this was really amazing. But here's how it happened. It was a very odd situation, which you'll kind of be the first to know because it's, you know, the press didn't really cover this backstory. But basically, I have a great relationship with Jim Inhofe. Hard to believe. He is my chairman now on the Environment and Public Works Committee. That committee, we do two things, environment and public works. When it comes to the environment, Jim Inhofe and I, Venus and Mars doesn't begin to I cannot, you know, for example, I say climate change is one of the greatest challenges facing the human race. It's a moral issue, it's an imperative, and he says it's a hoax. And what am I talking about? It's not happening. He doesn't care that 98% of the scientists say human activity is causing it. He goes with the 2% who are paid off by big oil, who say it's not. That's, you know me, and he know, if he was here, I'd say the same thing. And Lord knows he'd say the same things about me that he would always say, because we have that kind of relationship. But what we found common ground on is the public works side of the committee. He, to quote Jim, because I could give his speech, he's one of the most conservative people ever to serve, blah, 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 and he believes in a strong military and a strong infrastructure. That's about it. And so, fine, we teamed up. And we've been able to vote out really good bills out of the committee when everyone thought we'd never have another transportation bill. And we did it again this year. And we did it in June. We came out with this bill, 20-0 vote. It was a 6-year authorization, a pretty good increase over the period. Not everything we need because, you know, we have 60,000 bridges that are falling down. And I'm serious, they're structurally deficient, marked so. And we have 50% of our roads, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, 50% of our roads are in disrepair. So he's got the same problems in Oklahoma. We did the bill, 20-0. No action was forthcoming. He and I got frustrated. I took the issue to my caucus and I said, look, Mitch McConnell and the Republican leadership have got to move on this. After all, we have this bipartisan bill. Their chairman voted this out, led the fight on it. So we did a great thing. We created a countdown clock as to how many days it is until the trust fund goes bust. Because the Highway Trust Fund takes in the gas tax and other revenues. It goes straight in there, and that's what we can spend. So it was 60 days going bust, 30 days going bust. And we stood in front of this countdown clock until it was like 8 days going bust, and finally they called Uncle, and they said, okay, we'll take a look at this. And Mitch McConnell took it on because we had essentially said, pay attention to this. It's a disaster. And I know we have some people here who are in the building business, and they were all behind this, and the labor unions were behind it. And so we had business, labor, government, the counties, the cities, the whole world, except for enough people in the Senate and the House. So, so Mitch said, okay. And he called me and he said, I'll work with you on it. I said, great, let's go. And so my caucus was very, shall I say, most of the leadership in my caucus was not pleased with the process. And I said, you know what, I get it, but we've got to do something or we're not going to have anything happen. So I went off and worked with Republicans and Democrats on the appropriate committees. There's like 4 committees that have jurisdiction. And I don't want to make this too long, but it was an amazing experience. And the toughest part was, how do you pay for it? I am ready to go with anything that makes sense except cutting spending on other things that we cause unemployment. So I was open to a gas tax. I was open to a tax at the wellhead and do away with the gas tax, and that would give us plenty of money. I was open to vehicle miles traveled. I said in a press conference, you know the song, there are 50 ways to leave your lover? Well, there's 50 ways to fund the trust fund, and I'm for all of them. But that was me, and I had like 2 other people who felt the same way. So we had to come up with ways to pay for it that are, shall we say, crazy, just have nothing to do with the trust fund. A tax over here, an extension of a tax over there, what we call cats and dogs. And so my caucus didn't love that. They wanted to do international tax reform. I was all for that, couldn't get that done. So Mitch and I came up with a package. Not bad, really not bad. Enough to fund the thing for 3 years with an additional 3 years of authorization. And to make a very long story as short as I can, but I am a senator and you know how much we talk. We got the votes and it passed overwhelmingly at the end of the day in the Senate. Now it's in the House. I've talked to Schuster, who's the Republican chairman. I've talked to DeFazio, who's the Democratic ranking member. They seem very ready to go. My prediction today, and I make it with some trepidation, is we will have a bill that will at least fund 3 years. And believe me, that'd be the first time in 10 years we funded a multi-year bill. So it was a matter of turning the political heat on and getting the outside groups, many of you are inside this room because you were part of it, to press both parties, and we got it done in the end. But I would say it's a very bright spot in this Congress, but it's ridiculous that we haven't solved the long-term problem of how to pay. We haven't raised the gas tax in so many years, I think since Clinton. And you could do a penny a month for 10 months, you wouldn't feel it, and you would solve your problem. Can't get anyone, so I'll do what I can. And the sadness is what an effort it took. Sleepless nights, calling it, Mitch's people at 11 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock at night. I'm out, I'm gone, you can't do that tax, but it hurts people. But, and, their walkouts, the last minute, horrible, crazy stuff. But we got it done, and now anyone here who cares about this issue, focus on the House and Boehner, and they have got to get a bill up, and we've got to get this done because our roads are falling apart. And California, I pray they get the ability to do it in their hand. I think they're dealing with the same issues, but they can't do it alone. They count in California, 50% of the program is federal, 50% is state. In other states, Rhode Island's 100% federal. And it ranges from 100% to about 50. And we need, because California gets $4 billion a year from the Highway Trust Fund. Think about how much that is. It's huge. We're a country. By the way, we're a great country. Anyway, that's a very long answer to a very short question.
Well, but it's an important one. It's a very important one. The number one issue in our polls now, Californians say water.
Yeah.
And the state is trying to do what it can. And you pretty recently have introduced two bills, on one that's focused on a drought emergency, one that's the W21 bill, the 21st Century Water bill. I wonder if you could talk about what those bills would do for California, and in the current context of Congress, are they going to pass?
The second question is harder than the first. So let me take the first question. What do we try to do? There are actually three bills that are pending. There's the Boxer Water 21 bill. There's the Huffman-Boxer bill that deals more with easing the pain on farm workers and Mass and other things. And there's the Feinstein-Boxer bill, which kind of grabs a little bit of everything, plus allows some water transfers, but still respects the Endangered Species Act. Water is the issue that if you touch it, your body gets shocked. I mean, it's just a very difficult issue. So I decided to take a very different approach to the water issue, which is, I'm done with the water wars. If you're one stakeholder and you want me to turn against the other ones, call somebody else. And if you want me to do this in secret, call somebody else, because I won't. I think we must get together as urban users, suburban users, as water districts, as farmers, as fishermen, as environmentalists, all of us. We have to get together and we have to share the pain of this moment. And isn't California extraordinary? We have saved 31% of our usual water use. Let's hear some applause on that. I mean, that's the cheapest way to get more water is to conserve it in the first place. And this state is amazing. And I'm so very, very proud of what we've done. But we also have to consider this could be, even if we get El Nino, which pray we do, we know it's going to bring some problems with it. We're going to have to be ready to deal with the heartache and the problems it brings, but we've got to get El Nino. We need to fill those reservoirs. We've got to manage to trap some of this water so that we can do groundwater recharging. We have to be smart about this, but we've got to manage the water in a very different way by much more capture and so on. So we have to be prepared for that, but we have to be prepared for drought long term. Unless the scientists are dead wrong, it's going to be a permanent deal. And this is a huge problem. That means we need to figure things out. Conserve, conserve, conserve gets you so far, but also try to get a water supply from the ocean, desal. Now, I'm the biggest environmentalist in the Senate. I can say that without a doubt. But I think the environmentalists have to come to the table and we have to figure out how to do desal in a way that makes sense. And that means using solar energy. It means being very smart about what happens when you suck water out. We have things to do. One environmentalist came to me very agitated, and my friend, and said, "What about all the salt?" I said, you know, it's not nuclear material. We can deal with this. We can figure this out. I know we can. So the bottom line is we've got to figure out new sources of water. If you look at Israel, they've figured out how to do it. And we need to do water recycling, all of the above. So these bills, to answer your point, do a lot for California. Each one of them, it's between $1.3 billion and $2 billion each bill for these packages we could give out to counties, to cities, to communities that are saving water and that are capturing water, and research into the desal and helping make it work. I am convinced that in the next couple of years, we've got to do this. Now, as far as can I get it through, the good news is I've talked to Inhofe about it, and he's very interested in holding hearings on desalination, or desalination, which is the correct way to say it. And we're going to be doing those hearings. And I think people understand the need to look at this. It's an adaptation technique. It's not something everyone wants to do. But you know that poem, water, water everywhere and not a drop to drink, right? and how the boards just shrink. I remember that from elementary school. We've got to figure out a way to get more water in a way that's sensible and also do our part in conservation. I think we can do it. I look at the state, I think we can do almost anything. And that's how I feel, and I'm excited about it. And that's an area where I'll continue to be working with you.
Thank you.
In my afterlife. Not in the afterlife, in my afterlife. Okay.
Good, thank you. So another area in which you've provided leadership for a long, long time has been around climate change. And in this last week, you sent a letter to the members of our legislature expressing your support for what is probably the biggest thing that they're dealing with right now, which is SB 350 and SB 32, the climate change legislation. President Obama has taken actions around climate change and is saying things about the Arctic and expressing concerns about climate change right now. Give us a sense about just how we're doing, both as a state and a nation, around the topic of climate change, which some people have described as, the greatest existential threat that we face.
We are not doing nearly enough. And the reason is, I'm talking about the federal level, then I'll get to the state.
Okay.
It's inconvenient, as Al Gore said. It's so inconvenient. When I took the gavel of the Environment Committee in 2008, the first hearing I had was on climate change. And every scientist that came up predicted things that are absolutely happening all around us. They predicted the droughts, they predicted the floods, the extreme weather, the extreme heat, they predicted the level of ocean rise, they predicted species getting into trouble, they predicted everything that's happening. And at that, in 2008, I put together a book. I don't know what made me do it, but I did it. I put together a book of the whole hearing. And it was a proud moment for me because it was so bipartisan. We had people from Republican administrations testify, Democratic administrations, bipartisan scientists and all of that. We had bipartisan senators from Olympia Snowe and Judd Gregg and so on, even John McCain. And I took all of their statements and put them in this green book, and I have it. And it'll go into my archives, and it'll be read. But what happened was, all of a sudden, shockingly, all the Republican support went away. And even some of the Democratic support went away. And you know me, straight from the heart, it's all about special interests, pounding them. And there's no reason, when 98% of the scientists tell you this is going to happen, I mean, really, all you need is a pulse and a heartbeat and a brain, even not such a good one, to follow them. And this whole deal of, I'm not a scientist, what do I know? Right, you sure aren't. So listen to the ones who are. I mean, this is the new thing. Oh, I'm not a scientist. So I asked a question. John Boehner was one of those who said, I'm not a scientist. They all say that. So I said, if John Boehner has pain in his body and he goes to the doctor and the doctor, God forbid, says, I'm so afraid you just have a terminal illness, you really got a problem. What is he going to say? I'm not a doctor, what do I know? No, he's not. He's going to say, give me the name of 3 other doctors, let me go see them and see. Let's say he went to 10 doctors and 9 of them said he had this real problem, but there was a cure, and they all say there's a way to cure it. He's not going to walk out of there and say, I'm not a doctor. He's going to follow 90% of the doctors with whatever they suggest. So this whole thing is ridiculous, this approach to it. And they parade these dissenters in front of the committee, NAF does, and you look at their bio, I just say to myself, show me their bio. Worked for the oil companies, worked for the coal companies. These are the guys that are telling us, and gals, fewer gals, but a couple gals, that are telling us there's no such thing as human activity impacting us. So we are in a mess because we all know what's happening. We see it out the window. I did a trip to Hawaii to check on what's happening. I went to some I saw some elderly people who had lived in this one complex in Maui, I think it was Maui, for the longest time, and all of a sudden, they're going to lose the whole building because the waves are coming right up, and they used to have a massive beach. That's why they built it there. Folks, this is here now. So I'm lamenting the fact that everybody knows it. And if you look at polls, young people think anyone who's a denier is nuts. And they actually say they're nuts. And yet that's what we have. So that's why I think this presidential election is critical once we get over all the noise and all the Trump TV and we get into the issues. You know, people are going to just look around and say, what's going on? So we've been able to do very little. If it wasn't for Barack Obama understanding that the Clean Air Act gives him the tools, we would do nothing. But he knew that right away. And one of the things I said, once I saw all the support evaporating from the Congress, because remember, we need 60, we got 56 votes for cap and trade bill all those years ago. But we fell short. Nancy got it passed over in the House. And that was it. But this is where we are, Mark. We're at a place where the president has to use the Clean Air Act. I predicted to the press the best tool in our toolbox was the Clean Air Act because it includes greenhouse gases. 8 years the Bush administration fought that. Remember how that case they had? And they fought, and they kept saying, well, the Clean Air Act does not include greenhouse gas emissions. All you had to do is read it. Now, I am not a lawyer. I am by osmosis. My husband's a lawyer, my son's a lawyer, my father was a lawyer. But I'm not a lawyer. And I read the thing, and here's what it says. It says, this act covers everything, including greenhouse gas emissions. It basically says that. You don't need to even be, you know, you could be in kindergarten and just learn to read and you could see it. But 8 years, and the Supreme Court had such a hard time. 5-4. Thank you, Anthony Kennedy. Whew. He's from California. And that case was enormous. If we had lost that case, Mark, we wouldn't be here. We'd be doing less than nothing. So the Clean Air Act forces the president, once there's an endangerment finding, which there was, and it was basically written in the Bush administration, you have no choice. You have to move. So the next big fight we have at the federal level is the Clean Coal Power Plant rule, which basically says coal plants clean up or close up. And we're under a huge battle. We'll win it, but if we didn't have a filibuster, we'd lose it, just FYI. And that's where we are. As far as the state, hooray for the state. And the reason I wrote that letter, Diane and I did together, to say to De Leon and to say to the state players, do this, is because we need this leadership desperately. When I say California's a country, we really are a country. We don't think about ourselves that way. But we're 40 million people almost, and we would be something like the 7th largest economy in the world, something like that. And what we do really matters. And the goals in this new bill to bring us to, you know, essentially just not getting into the weeds on it, you know, we would get 50% of our power from clean sources by 2030. It's such an exciting goal. It's an attainable goal, and it's not as strong as Hawaii's goal, by the way, in terms of their electricity sector. So it's doable. We can do this. And I just hope that the special interests don't win the day on this. Because here's the point. They may win the day today, but they and everybody else, we lose at the end of the day. Last thing I'll say on climate. I read an article in the New York Times a while ago, not that long, a few months, and I don't know, it was front page, and the scientists are telling us the following. If you remember nothing else of what I said today, remember this. We are at the point we are now choosing between an unpleasant planet and an uninhabitable planet. That's where we are inaction. And I say the world's in action, not just us. But we're the leader of the world. And all this stuff about, why should we do it when China and India doesn't? Since when do we wait for China to do anything? They're awful over there. People walk around with masks over there. They see the air. They can't breathe. I was there, and every day was great. Every day was great. And finally, one day, the sun came out like for a nanosecond, and the guide said, "It's a sunny day." And I said, "No, it's not." And you know they get hazardous duty pay if you're assigned to the Chinese foreign embassy. You get hazardous duty pay, and your kids can't go out. That's what's going on. So since when do we wait for China to lead the way on any environmental issue, any worker rights issue, frankly, any issue? Maybe high-speed train. But that's what I'm saying. So it's desperately important that California win the day. It's desperately important that Obama's policies get carried forward. Not that he's perfect, okay? But he's done a lot. And if we don't win this presidential election and all that goes out the window, we're in deep trouble.
Senator Boxer, I read an op-ed that you wrote in the Huffington Post recently about the Iran agreement.
Yeah.
And while we don't normally deal with foreign policy issues at the Public Policy Institute of California, I thought at this moment in time, what you described as a vote of conscience around this, similar to your vote of conscience around the Iraq War, I thought it was important for people here to understand your thinking around the Iran agreement.
Well, I'm really glad you raised it, and I know it's a little bit off what you usually do, but still in all, war does impact everybody, right? And that's what this is about. Are we going to try to avert a showdown? And I would say this, I've studied this agreement, I'm not going to get into every single detail of it, but I would say the basic tenets of it are that we block the ability of Iran to go with a plutonium bomb, a uranium bomb. We have the greatest inspection regime ever put forward in any agreement. And we have 92 nations who are for this. So to walk away from an agreement like this is very dangerous. I'm just going to do something I don't normally do, but I think it's that important. It take me a minute or two. Here's who's supporting the deal. You need to know this because it's very similar to how many scientists say there's climate change. Just listen to this. 92 countries and counting, 29 of the nation's top scientists and experts, including 6 Nobel laureates, 75 arms control and nuclear nonproliferation experts, 60 national security leaders, 36 retired U.S. generals and admirals, more than 100 former U.S. ambassadors, the former Undersecretary of State and 6 former U.S. ambassadors to Israel, the former head of Shin Bet, which is Israel's internal security service, the former director of the Mossad in Israel, the former member of the Knesset, former mayor of Haifa, and a retired major general in the Israeli Defense Force, the former chairman of the Armed Services Committee, Carl Levin and John Warner, former Senators Richard Lugar and Ben Johnson, both bipartisan deal, 11 Jewish members of Congress, including Congressman Barney Frank, Mel Levine, Senate Majority Leader George Mitchell. He's not a Jewish member. I don't know why he got that. We converted him for the purpose of this. But here's a good one, spoken like a Jewish girl from Brooklyn. 340 U.S. rabbis from major streams of Judaism. And for those of you who are not of that faith, that is most of you, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. So the reason I say this is because when I came to this decision, it wasn't easy for me because I've been one of Israel's strongest supporters. And the last 2 strategic bills to help Israel were written by yours truly. And they were bipartisan bills. They had overwhelming passage, and the president signed them. And I went to the White House and just thrilled. But you have to understand the leadership against this are the same people, for the most part, who brought you the Iraq War. And I don't even want to remind you about who they are, because they'll bring you post-traumatic stress. People like Dick Cheney and, you know, others in that category, the neocons. That's, for the most part, who's there. The Jewish community is split. Benjamin Netanyahu, when he spoke to the Congress, he was eloquent. I sat right there. And his bottom line was, get a better deal. Well, get a better deal, that's code word for no deal. Because on the other side, he said, you can never trust Iran, so there's no deal. This is the best deal we could have gotten. And then they're saying, well, and if there's a suspicion of some place doing illegal activity, it's going to take 24 days. By the time you get in there, you should know a couple of things about that. All the other nuclear agreements in the world, including the side agreement we have, all have no time limit. And you cannot hide any nuclear work. Yeah, you could hide a computer, but the nuclear material lasts thousands of years. You can't hide it. So we're going to get into all those places. And the last point I'd make is, Iran is a terrible player on the world scene. Horrible player. They support terrorism. They're duplicitous and all those things. And the bottom line of it is, do you want a nation like that with a nuclear weapon or without one? And I am just saying to you, this is the only way we can hope to have them not have a nuclear weapon. And that's just as plain and simple as it gets. This vote is a vote of major conscience. Mm-hmm. It is not a party line thing, although it's shockingly turning into, I don't know of any Republican who's for it. Maybe we'll get one, I don't think so, in the Senate. Mm-hmm. And what we need is 34 to sustain the president's veto. So that's where we stand on it. I would urge you to read everything you can on this and understand when people say get a better deal, that's code word for no deal, and it's code word for war. By the way, war is a stain on the human race. War is always an alternative. It should never be the first. It should never be the second. It's the last. So we can always, we're so powerful. And the president has said it well, everything remains on the table, but we have a chance. And for us to walk away from it is terrible. And I'm so glad you give me the chance to talk to these leaders about this. And I respect it if you come down in a different place. Mm-hmm. Tom Cotton is the only one over there on the Republican side who basically said the truth. He said, let's go to war with Iran. I'm ready. He's ready. I'm glad he's ready. Mm-hmm. But you know what? America is not ready. And I remember in 2008, I think it was, John McCain did his little singing rendition of bomb, 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 bomb Iran. So there are people that want to do that now. And why don't they just say that? They should. Tom Cotton said it. He's the only one. Why not say it? Because that's the option. You don't have a deal. And for those people who say, oh, we'll just start sanctions all over again. No, we're not, because 92 nations aren't going to go with it. We will be isolated. And then they say, well, we'll just sanction everybody who trades with them. Really? We're going to sanction our best friends, the Brits. We're going to sanction all of our allies, Australia, New Zealand, all the rest of the country. We're not. It's not going to happen. So this is an important vote, and I would urge you, if you have a chance, if you have some time, to watch the debate. I think it's going to be very, very respectful debate, and I think it's going to be very interesting, but I would urge you to watch it, and then we'll have this vote. And if you feel you want to weigh in, if you feel you've come to a decision, you should really weigh in, not with Diane and me, because we have already decided, so you can weigh in, but we've decided. But the Congress people from the Bay Area, they're not all decided yet. Oh. So I hope you will weigh in. If you have a strong opinion, one way or the other, with me or not with me. Thank you.
Thank you. So I wonder if you could help me understand what's going on in the presidential race right now. Because I spent the weekend reading about the Republican side and the Democratic side, and I don't know, I'm confused. And
You guys do polls, how
Yeah.
could you be confused?
Yeah. Well,
No, that's
maybe you
why
can help me understand what it says about the Republican Party and the Democratic Party and where the nation is going and what people think about Washington and what they want next from leadership.
Right. There's a lot of anger in the country, and I think that's reflected in the support for the angry Donald Trump. And my friend who's always angry, Bernie Sanders, I love him, but he's always pounding the table. It explains that. I think that the pounding that Hillary's been getting unceasingly for using a non-government server, just as Colin Powell did, with the one difference, he destroyed all his emails and she turned over 55,000 pages, is inexplicable to me, honestly. And it has been hard for her, even though she has taken some great positions on the issues. And I would say this, the Republicans in their primary are killing each other. You know, it's just really, oh my God, killing each other, scratching each other's eyes out, peeling off each other's skin, you know, kind of like that. And Trump is kind of, I would say, bullied the others into either total silence on some of his outrageous comments about women, about Hispanics, about President Obama. I could go on. The one thing about him is he insults everybody. So, you know, and so they're either cowed into silence or they'll say a couple of things and he hits back and then they're cowed into silence again. And I don't know how that all gets resolved. But I will tell you this, when we get back, one of the interesting things is when we get back, we will have the mother of all budget battles because there are Republicans who want to shut down the government over Planned Parenthood, even though Planned Parenthood, 98% of what they do is basically health care. And they help almost 3 million women and men in this country get cancer screenings. They save lives and all that. They're willing to shut down the government. And I believe once we're back in session and we're focusing on these things and all of the incredible cuts that the Republicans have proposed in their budget across the board on the domestic side, you name the issue, it's cut, while they increase defense spending through smoke and mirrors. So I think when real life comes back and these issues are pending, we'll see a little bit more of legitimate presidential race because they're going to have to focus on the issues rather than on the insults and these broad, you know, brush attacks on people and all of that. And I, again, think, because I'm a Hillary Clinton supporter, because I told you, straight from the heart, because I don't think anyone's ever been as prepared. And what's different on the Democratic side is they're not beating each other up. They're basically saying the same thing. They're talking about income inequality. They're talking about voter rights. They're talking about comprehensive immigration reform. They're talking about reasonable gun laws. They're talking about, Head Start and fair budgeting and finding cures for Alzheimer's and cancer and all that. So I really think the difference between the parties is one is kind of the cult of personality over there going on and this bizarre attacking, everybody and fighting against each other versus the Democratic primary where they're basically taking on the same issues and putting them out there in their way. And I think it'll all get resolved. But I do think once we get back and we start taking up the real issues, it should bring a better focus, and maybe we won't have Trump TV anymore. Maybe we'll actually have news programming again. You know, remember that? Now you put on the news station, I'm watching Donald Trump, who, by the way, did the most vicious insult to women. Another one, forget the first one, the name calling. Now he says, basically, by attacking one of Hillary Clinton's staffers, which should be, frankly, off limits, but he said, well, basically, because she is a top staffer to Hillary Clinton, she must have seen classified information, and therefore, ipso facto, she definitely passed it on to her husband because she loves him. So now we're at a point under Donald Trump's rules, if you are a woman and you love a man, you can't ever see classified information because you cannot be trusted. What an outrage. What a complete outrage. And then in the beginning of the Iran, see, now I'm doing Trump TV. I admit it. I've fallen for it. In the beginning of the Iran deal, he said, why didn't they have a woman negotiate the deal? Earth to Donald Trump, Wendy Sherman negotiated the Iran deal, and she's fantastic. But the point is, we got to get off this broad brush attack onto the issues, and then I think this country will be saved. But if we don't, if the media continues to do the cult of personality deal, I don't know how this is all going to go. But it's really up to us. We have to get through all that garbage, all of us. And we have to fight for the things that we know are important. And I'll close with this. I think the issue that gets the least attention, that should get the most attention, is this attack on voter rights. And what makes our country different than every country is we have that right to vote, that right to say who we trust, who we want in there, you know, the whole thing. And it's just under massive attack in the states. And the Supreme Court, by overturning one aspect of the Voter Rights Act, basically said, all bets are off. Pass whatever laws you want. And then if somebody sues, we'll take a look at it. That's a disaster. And that's what's happening. So I want a president who's going to fight for the right to vote. Not the future, but in this election, we're going to have to do it. And I will say this, if we don't, I intend to go wherever I have to go in the country to make sure people get the ability to vote. I heard in some places in Ohio, they have literally said, in order to vote, you have to go, 5 miles away from your house or something, mostly in the poor neighborhoods, in the African-American neighborhoods. And we're going to have to go and drive people to the polls. And we just can't complain. We have to fight in the courts, and then we have to get out of our comfort zone and get out of our, feeling that everything is great, because it's not when people can't vote in this nation. And I am getting worked up, so I'll stop.
Okay. Do we have time to take a few questions from the audience?
Of course.
Wonderful.
Today there is a federal court appeal hearing in Pasadena on the processing of the death penalties in California. And California right now has more people awaiting their death penalties than Florida and Texas combined. I was wondering, do you think the process of proceeding with the death penalty should be changed?
Well, I think, in my view, right now there should be a moratorium, because they don't know what they're doing with it. And it's not right. So I'm for a moratorium federally, and I'm on that moratorium. In terms of the long term, I think the first step is to see if it could be done in a way that makes sense. I have supported the death penalty for heinous crimes like terrorism and murder of a policeman and other crimes like that. So, but right now I'm for a moratorium because I don't think it's done in a fair way. And especially, we now have the way to use forensics to really figure this out. I think everyone who's on death row, they ought to have a way to use those forensics to see whether they can figure it out. So that's where I am, for a moratorium until we figure this out.
Question from the middle here, someone? Somebody come over and...
Hal?
And I liked your question. It was short to the point. Thank you. So,
Thank you. Thank you, Senator, for your strong words about the drought legislation. And as you know, Senator Lisa Murkowski has announced that she's going to have a hearing on both your bill, the Feinstein-Boxer bill, but also the House-passed bill, the Valadao bill, which you opposed, and we thank you for that. But they control the votes, not only in the Senate Energy Committee, but on the floor and in the House-Senate conference. And what's the strategy for continuing to resist the attacks on the Endangered Species Act that are embedded in that House bill? How do we keep the Senate bills from moving in the direction of the House bill?
Well, we need 41 votes in the Senate to do that. And that's going to mean a lot of hard work by you and others and me, because that bill is devastating. It's already a battle to save the endangered species given climate change. Now, if we take water away from them, it's going to only exacerbate the problem. So, we need those 41 votes, and we'll stop it in its tracks. And even the threat of filibustering is not good for McConnell, because he wants to get things done. He really does. And that, if I stand up and say, you see me standing here, I'm going to be standing here for 5 days, he doesn't want to see me in any event, but definitely not standing for 5 days.
a question from this side. All the way up front. Lenny?
What's next for Senator Boxer?
Nice question. A lot of exciting things. I have written my memoirs. It took me 2.5 years. And
The Art of Tough, it's
yes,
called, right?
it's called The Art of Tough. And you know how I am. And it is an art that I had to learn slowly. In the beginning, it was, what? And the end, it was, let's talk. So, there was a way I evolved. And I think a lot of the book is, in a lot of ways, empowering to see how you can, regardless of what your world is and what your work is, and that you can employ this art in a way to get things actually done. So this memoir, the release date is June the 7th of next year, right in the heart of the presidential. It'll be very interesting. And I'm gonna go all over the country and talk about, and there's a lot of issues in there, from, what I talked about, civil rights and human rights and women's rights and environment and the battle against AIDS, which takes me back right here to San Francisco when Phil Burton died, and I was the only one representing San Francisco, and people were dropping. We didn't know what to do, and just thinking about that and getting the emotion of that and what it was like to go to members of Congress who literally didn't know what I was talking about and literally beg for money and got a little money. And Henry Waxman did it in LA. And just all of that. So the book itself is going to be a jumping off place for me to do a lot of things. If people like it and they, who knows, I could have a radio show, I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I'm very open to where that particular thing leads me. But I think I'll be speechifying and if, doing those kind of empowerment talks, because not just for women, but for people who really have a cause and have a belief and are losing faith and hope that things can change. I have examples. I can prove that if you hold your ground, and my friend Amy Klobuchar has a great expression, stand your ground, but find common ground. And it's just a really good point. And it's sometimes hard. The common ground may be just a little piece of ground. But if you can get there, it's important. So I think, you're going to see a lot more of me probably than you did when I was in the Senate, because I couldn't do a lot of stuff I wanted to do when I was in the Senate. The environmental movement is in my soul. The women's movement is in my soul. The civil rights movement is in my soul. Fighting for peace is in my soul. And that's not going to die just because I'm not on the Senate floor. But it'll take me to a different venue. I don't know what that venue will be, but I hope you'll be part of it.
Well, that's very exciting. And we could go on and on, but I just want to thank you for your leadership And I want to thank you for your interest in the Public Policy Institute of California and for joining us all here today and for telling it like it is, which is what you do so well. So
all I know how to do.
I want to thank you and Mas for being part of the program today. Big thanks. Big thanks to all of you for coming out and being part of this really tremendous conversation that we've had here today. And I want to thank the sponsors and our donor circle members for supporting this work that we do to try to raise issues and awareness, because it's not just the people who are here, but we have a webcast. We will be showing this video, and I'm sure people will learn quite a lot from this conversation. It was very stimulating, very provocative at times. And for those of you who have time to continue to be here with us, we have some cookies and coffee outside. I'm going to hang around and hope to have a chance to visit with you all. I know that you're busy and have other things to do, but thank you so much for your leadership, Senator Boxer.
Thank you all.